welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for March 17th, 2020. Happy Green Day to everybody. And just in this fast evolving world of COVID-19, I look at our mission, part of our mission statement, which says our mission is to deliver high quality services essential to maintaining a safe, sustainable community. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that in a little bit. Item number 1, roll call, please.
Councilmember Brennan.
Here.
Councilmember Contreras.
Here.
Mayor Mars.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
And Councilmember Lehman by telephone.
Here.
Thank you very much. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Any changes, corrections, Mr. Reynolds?
There's no changes since it has been published as of yesterday, Mayor, which all of council members received a copy of and have a copy of on the table currently, and it was posted according to state law, so we're all good there.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Brennan, a second by Councilor Contreras. Further discussion? Roll call. By roll call?
Has to be a roll call vote.
Everyone for the? Okay, I apologize. Councilor Brennan?
Aye.
Councilor Contreras?
Aye.
Councilor Lehman?
Aye.
Councilor Whiting?
Aye.
Mayor Mars? Aye. The agenda stands approved. Item number 4, the consent business. Are there any changes, corrections, deletions, Mr. Reynolds?
No, Mayor, everything is correct.
Okay. Councilor Whiting?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
A second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Before we would vote, we will read the consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor Mars, members of council. These are the consent agenda items for March 17th of 2020. 4A1 adopts resolution number R2020-037, which certifies assessments for delinquent sewer and storm drainage accounts from 2019, adds a $25 administrative charge for collection with payable 2020 property taxes, and writes off 88 delinquent accounts in the amount of $845.45. 4A2 approves the minutes from the March 4th, 2020 meeting. 4B1 adopts resolution number R2020-039, a resolution of appreciation for retired firefighter Eric Bender. 4C1 approves the 2020 concession agreements with Shakopee Youth Hockey Association, the Shakopee Soccer Association, the Shakopee Indian Baseball Association, and Shakopee Coyote Baseball. 4C2 approves the Shakopee Soccer Association's plan and request for improvements at the 17th Avenue Sports Complex. 4D1 adopts resolution number 2020-TAC-027, which approves the final plat of Canterbury Park, 11th edition. 4D2 adopts resolution number R2020-TAC-028, which approves Canterbury Park Entertainment LLC's interim use permit request to allow an RV park for 28 recreational camping vehicles. 4D3 adopts resolution number R2020-TAC-036, which authorizes the adoption of the alternative urban area review for Jackson Township. 4D4 adopts resolution number R2020-TAC-038, which approves the preliminary and final plat of River Bluff Addition. 4D5 adopts resolution number R2020-TAC-031, which approves the submission of an application to the AARP Community Challenge Grant. 4E1 adopts resolution number R2020-TAC-029, which approves the submission of an application for a community-oriented policing services, mental health, and wellness grant. 4E2 declares listed property held by the police department as surplus and authorizes their proper sale or disposal. 4F1 adopts resolution R2020-TAC-024, which awards a contract in the amount of $434,570 to BLD Services Incorporated for the 2020 Sewer Service Lateral Pipe Rehabilitation Project, which is Sewer TAC 20 TAC 003. 4F2 authorizes the execution of a professional services agreement with Barr Engineering to complete a targeted BMP study for the downtown Shakopee sub-watershed. 4F3 authorizes a cooperative agreement with Scott County for the traffic management system operation, maintenance, and repair. 4F4 adopts resolution number R2020-TAG030, which approves plans and orders the advertisement for bids to reroute stormwater to protect historic sites, project number Storm TAC 19 TAC 003. 4F5 adopts resolution number R2020 TAC 025, which establishes Shenandoah Drive from 14th Avenue to Veerling Drive as a municipal state aid street. And finally, 7A2 is the monthly financial review for February.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much. I have a motion on the table and a second for the consent agenda. There would be no further discussion by voice vote. Counselor Brennan.
Aye.
Counselor Contreras.
Aye.
Counselor Lehman.
Aye.
Counselor Whiting.
Aye.
Mayor Mars, aye. The consent agenda has been approved. We would move ahead to item number 5. Now I'd like to call on any resident that would like to come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward and welcome. Speak clearly into the microphone.
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess one thing I think a lot of...
Your name and address?
Oh, Todd Partington. I'm at 2034 Mockingbird Avenue, and I'm glad to see my city council members. I know I was like looking at... I know everything is closed down in Minnesota today, and I think today there's only like 2 things that are open other than grocery stores and hospitals, and it's the casinos like Treasure Island and Mystic Lake. So I know Mystic Lake on their right on their webpage they talk about to ensure a healthy community environment and economy for generations to come. This is important in time, I believe, for Minnesota in the sense that right here, on there, they say their number 1 priority right here, health and safety of our guests and team members remain top priority. So, and on here, if you go and they say refer to the CDC for disease control and prevention. So, and you go there and you basically ask how does this, and basically it states right on their webpage that they have a link to of how to prevent close contact and transmission. You be within social distancing of 6 feet. Droplets will be in the air. Things of this, avoid close contact. And so, I guess my concern is, you know, this is just a headline from the Star Tribune about what steps they've taken, which is, and all the things that they say. I just returned from the casino just an hour ago, and I can't see any differences. They specify that they have 3 to a table, but I have plenty of pictures here and evidence where I've just taken pictures and transferred from my laptop. There's thousands of people there. We have the next 3 weeks where people don't have anything to do. They're going to be going to that casino. You think it's busy now? You wait in 2 weeks. I'm not saying it, I'm just informing. I don't know anything about human nature. This is all an abnormal thing. But my concern for Minnesota, almost 3 weeks ago, we had the same issue in Washington. The first people that were getting sick were in the casinos. Again, over at, you know, this isn't like at Wild Horse Casino in Washington State. Employee got sick, and they had interaction. So I guess my concern is, I'm just stating something I think is obvious. I think this whole thing that we're doing today is worthless, really, in the sense of shutting down. We have thousands of people that are just getting together right now. I have pictures that are violating CDC, thousands of incidents every minute that are happening. If the council could ask, request, or have a dialogue, and please ask them to close down. There's plenty of other casinos around the nation have closed down. Please, I'm just asking. I'm not requesting. I'm just respectfully asking if that discussions had happened, or that you guys at any time in the near future, as soon as possible. I think that is a very high priority. I think that might be the most important thing that you can possibly affect for the state of Minnesota. And you guys have more effect than anybody. Forget about the president, forget about the governor. This is right here. This is the largest mass right next. This is going to be another epicenter. It's not if, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
I appreciate your passion for it. The Shakopee, Minnewacan Sioux community is a sovereign nation. They don't answer to the city or the state, they answer to the federal. You're correct. Other casinos around the state have decided to close temporarily. The Shakopee, Minnewacan Sioux community has not taken that step in full yet. And certainly we could have discussions to suggest, but beyond that, from our city standpoint, city council, it's not in our power.
Can you make it a public record that you suggested it to the Shakopee? It's right on their front page.
Yeah.
It's their first thing that they're there for, right?
Right.
Public safety.
Public
health
safety.
of the community. Every single
Mayor Mars?
Councilor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. I am aware that the state and the Department of Health are in contact with the Minnewacan Sioux. And I know the Sioux Tribal Council, Business Council, and their membership are in discussions about how the process would look like to do some of these things. So they're fully aware of it and are working on it. And I do know the state is in contact with them.
Okay.
I've just taken a full walk just now. I went the latest to give them the biggest benefit of the doubt. The later you go, the more you get to see their actions. I walk around, I didn't see a single person cleaning any of the machines. I didn't see any cleaning efforts whatsoever. I didn't see any hand sanitizer anywhere. I took pictures on the entrances, on the tables, nearby. All the machines are turned on. All of them, all the electronic machines. I did not see one single person wiping down out of the 150,000 square feet. There were plenty of employees there. None of them were cleaning. I didn't see at the time for the 20 minutes I was there, just an hour ago, or hour and a half. But I thank you for your time, and I hope
Bring it to our attention.
we can resolve this benefit. It's going to happen. It should have happened 2.5 weeks ago in Washington State. It's going to happen eventually.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
This is a time when a citizen can come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we would move ahead to number 6, but no business removed from consent. We would move right to 7A1, Emergency Response Policy and Update. Mr. Reynolds.
Well, good evening, members of council. This brief is essentially twofold. The first is it's a review of the proposed emergency response policy. And secondly, it is an update on what we're currently doing in the city. And as you'll see, I finished this about an hour ago, and there's already been one change that I'll go into. So things are very fluid, to say the least. When it comes to the city, our role in this particular situation is to ensure that we have continuity of operations. And essentially that is asking one simple question: how do we continue to provide services to the public when we have a situation such as this that causes great duress internally amongst our organization? This particular policy provides guidance to allow the flexibility to address our current situation and try to make sure that we complete that mission. It establishes priorities in our operations, so when confronted with an emergency situation, we can pivot our focus of effort to make sure that we're addressing those priorities. Yep. The first step in that is determining what our critical services are, because the ultimate objective at the very end of the day is to maintain all of those critical services. As we've designated those currently in the city, that is police response and emergency management, fire response, certain portions of our public works department, that included sewer, snow and ice, removal, emergency maintenance, recovery, emergency vehicle repair, and fuel. Communications is critical in this day and age, and that's why they've been designated also as a critical services. And then we also obviously have some infrastructure that we're concerned about as well. After we have those critical services, what we have are essential services, which is essentially the next tier. Those are police investigation and a host of admin functions that basically are designed to make sure that we keep our people paid and keep all of their benefits in place and make sure their issues are taken care of for them. Our next layer is our necessary services, and essentially necessary service are code enforcement, code inspections, our planning and development work and planning, permitting and inspecting different buildings and work sites, more of our public works operations, including general engineering, locating utilities, and routine vehicle maintenance, and finally licensing and general finance operations in our admin. And our last tier of services are frankly all those that we haven't talked about already. And those are considered to be our lowest tier of service. So this particular policy gives broad authority to the city administrator and department heads during emergency actions. It allows the closure of facilities, the suspension of non-essential operations. It allows the city administrator and department heads to adjust working assignments, locations, and priorities. We have the ability to suspend normal processes and approvals for accounts payable and payroll, and also to modify personnel rules. This is a lot of power, and it essentially is reserved for extraordinary times. This is not something that should happen on a daily basis, and this has to be reviewed on occasion, and the city administrator has a responsibility to report to the city council to ensure that we are doing everything under your guidance. But what it does provide is us the ability to make quick decisions and maintain flexibility. But that does not mean there is not a reporting requirement to council. This policy also sets clear expectations. We, unlike most organizations, need our people to be here. We need to work. We need to stay open because of those critical things that we talked about just a few minutes ago. It also sets the expectation that if an employee is ill, they have a responsibility to report that to their supervisor. And it also outlines that we're going to work with each individual employee based upon their situation to try to find a solution. But ultimately, it allows us the flexibility we need to be able to balance both the needs of the public and our internal needs with our employees. So let's talk about our current status of operations. A little background, first of all. I've been in government for quite a while, and I've had, unfortunately, the ability or the instances of being involved in some major things in the past, including 9/11 and the aftermath. My office was one of those that was anthrax during the U.S. Senate anthrax attack. I've been involved in 2 typhoons and an EOC commander in Japan, and was on senior EOC Emergency Operations Center staff for 3 hurricanes in South Florida. Now, why do I tell you that? Because it allowed me over the years to learn several very key points. First, it is critically important that we analyze the information we receive and make clear, calm, rational, and logical decisions based upon the information known at the time. We must also understand that that information that we have used and to make decisions will be wrong on occasion, just based upon what we're being able to bring into the organization. We're going to make assumptions based upon information that is incorrect. But the bottom line, as I said before, is we need to be flexible. So, as you know, under continuity of operations, we want to keep our local government functioning as best we can under any scenario, because again, we don't have that option to close everything down. So, I'm going to talk about 4 areas with you to give you an up-to-date status of exactly where we are right now on each of these issues. The first are city buildings and the current status. As you know, the community center and ice arena were closed effective today at 4:30 p.m. We essentially did that based upon looking at the school's decisions to close and recognizing that if we didn't take action, there was a high probability that we would have a large amount of young people in our facility. And we recognized some weeks ago that that might be something that we might have to do. And I know that you're aware of this because we've discussed it in the past. City Hall remains open, but the public should try to use alternative methods to conduct business. All city meeting rooms are currently closed to the public, and the fire stations are closed to the public under their individual protocol. In regards to events and meetings, all public scheduled events, classes, programs, or non-essential meetings are canceled in the city until further notice. All essential meetings under 10 people are allowed with acceptable social distancing. All non-emergency home inspections are postponed until further notice. However, it's important to recognize that new construction building inspections continue. And there's lots of reasons for that, but the biggest piece of it is that most of those inspections are done in open air. It's not finished buildings. And there is quite a bit of social distancing that comes in through the actual construction trade industry on a daily basis anyway. In other words, tradesmen aren't on top of each other in a single space. They normally work alone until they get their piece done. City council meetings will be held via electronic methods as of 18 March. Now, why 18 March? Well, the reality is we might need an emergency meeting between now and our next regularly scheduled meeting. Only essential items will be on the agenda. All other city board and committee meetings are canceled until further notice. All city training or meetings are suspended absent a waiver from the city administrator, and all city travel is suspended until further notice. Now, the most critical piece of our infrastructure, and that dealing with city employees. All employees are expected to show up for work absent some criteria, which I'm going to be mentioning in a few seconds. It's important, once again, that we have our employees here. We are preparing telework arrangements, but we have not instituted those at this time. However, there may be a case where something comes up that will happen, and it may be on a case-by-case basis, or it may be in general class of employees. But it's important for employees to understand that not everybody is equal when we look at telework. There may be situations where some people are allowed to telework and some are not. It's important to remember. The most important piece, all employees who are symptomatic for cold or flu need to stay home. If you come to work, you will be sent home. And any overseas travel, so I mean, clearly I can't say that employees can't travel overseas, but what I can say is that if you're going to go to vacation overseas and you come back, you have a responsibility to this organization to be in self-quarantine for 14 days. If employees cannot return to work, they'll be allowed to use sick leave, vacation pay, or non-paid leave if necessary. We are also looking individually that if there is a negative leave balance, or there is no leave available for an employee, we will look at those individual cases and see if we can't establish a negative leave balance. These particular portions, from what I'm gathering from the state and federal government, will probably change. I think that there's a move afoot to establish legislation that's going to ensure that this stuff is not going to be handled at the local level. But that being said, we will continue to review that. And finally, everything we just talked about is subject to change. We are in the most dynamic and fluid environment that I've been a part of in a while, and again, flexibility is the key. Now, earlier today, we had a report that we might have had someone with contact with someone who tested positive. And I want to share with you the email I just sent out to staff and to you as well that brings us to where we are in the situation. Earlier today, we had someone leave due to concerns that they may have had contact with someone who tested positive for COVID-19. Although that individual had no symptoms, in an abundance of caution, that individual will not be allowed back into their workplace absent either a 14th-day self-quarantine or a negative medical screening. Please feel free to reach out to either Nate or I if you have any specific concerns. It is important that we review events rationally and based upon factual evidence rather than letting our fears control our actions. Again, hand washing and social distancing remain our best defense against this virus. I appreciate your continued services to the residents of Shakopee. So sometimes it's not the facts that will impact what we do. It is the intonations. It is the people overreacting possibly to situations. This is clearly a serious issue, but we need to make sure that we're acting based upon facts and not irrational fear. So we will continue to monitor this on a daily basis at the staff level. But that being said, I'm more than happy to take any questions, and at some point we'll ask that you approve the policy or make modifications to it as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Questions of staff, and I guess we would start, if any, with Councilor Lehman.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Being through a couple of emergencies myself, I can totally understand what the administrator is trying to accomplish. Granted, I haven't been through this type of emergency. I am not the person spoken about. I have not been in contact. I've got an earache. That's it. No fever, nothing. And in abundance of caution, they asked me to call in, so I did. The safest route, obviously. So I would say that considering what we're dealing with, I think all precautions should be taken. And I read the document. It looks like it's laid out pretty well. Core services are our priority, and they should be. So I think thank you to Mr. Reynolds for doing a good job thinking through it.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councilor Brennan?
No, I don't have any questions, I don't think. Well, I guess I do. If a person is sent home, will they still be, and they have the option to telework, will they have that option to do so? Or do they have to report as a sick person and receive sick pay?
If they are homesick, if they actually have symptoms, that's different than if they're sent home and test positive with no symptoms.
Right.
And we will look at both of those cases on a case-by-case basis, but if you're sick, and you need to be worrying about your health as opposed to about work, unless, of course, you know, you've tested positive and one of those that are simply asymptomatic. And we will look at those on a case-by-case basis, but certainly if it warrants that, we would set up telework for that, yes.
All right, thank you.
Counselor Contreras?
Question, just appreciate you know, just to have this set for myself. I've never been a part of something so big, and we just, you know, we need this. We need to be able to know what our next step is. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Counselor Whiting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've talked about this in the past, you and I, about some of the other details that go along with this and the facilities cleaning and the processes involved with that. And I don't know if you want to touch on that, but since the public has been in contact with some of the city buildings and things, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Some city buildings are cleaned more frequently than others. For example, the Parks and Recreation buildings were cleaned quite a bit, but now that they are being shut down, they're going to continue to be cleaned for a bit, but then Mr. Tobin is going to have his staff work on other issues as opposed to that. So, but certainly, as with any other office building, surfaces need to be cleaned, the door handles need to be wiped off, and then it's ultimately up to each one of us. You know, we have a responsibility to clean spaces that we see that aren't clean or aren't comfortable with. We have a responsibility to clean our personal workspaces. And if I see a door handle here in City Hall that I think it needs to be wiped down, I'm going to do it. So it's all of us being involved in that cleaning effort. But yes, I mean, as any other office building, we're doing the same things.
Any procedures that we've enacted for our police or fire for gloves or anything like that?
Both police and fire have their internal protocols, and it's also based upon a step system. And the commanders of both those organizations make the determinations as to when those are going to be instituted. But certainly, both the fire department and the police department have protected materials available, and Chief Tate is available if you'd like to get a little more detail on that. He can certainly brief you on it.
Do we know of any shortages on PPE for our city staff?
No, sir.
Thank you.
No, we're in good shape.
Mr. Reynolds, I have a couple questions. This is specific to COVID-19. If I was exposed and went into self-quarantine, you said a case-by-case on whether I get paid or I have to use my vacation or sick time in that, if it's...
Well, that will be based upon whether or not you're working, Mayor. So if you decide to take vacation hours, you can certainly do that.
Right.
And just use that 14 days, or if appropriate, and what you do is an essential. The more as we go through this, we're going to start focusing on the essential things. If it's an essential act or an essential employment, then we'll do everything we can to facilitate some kind of teleworking environment.
Well, a lot of companies are, struggling with the pay aspect, and if you're exposed and have to self-quarantine and you get tested, there's some period of time that companies would pay for that, up to 14 days at the company I work for, but obviously very specific to the COVID-19. And with that, you're saying that would be addressed here on a case-by-case basis?
If we were to do something like that, it would not be on a case-by-case basis. It would be on a situational basis, meaning that if you meet the criteria, you would get it. Here's the bottom line. We're going to take care of our employees. We're going to make sure that they're whole at the end of the day. I personally believe that at some point the federal government, we have already started as part of the emergency declaration that the mayor signed, which we're going to talk about next, allows us the opportunity to start marking our expenses and our losses due to this particular situation. So we track these now, and at some day, my anticipation is that the federal or state government will come by and say, okay, we declared a federal and state disaster, we have funds available, and it's up to us then to articulate what those expenses and what those losses were, and so that's part of what we're doing now. I think that it's also very likely, based upon what we're hearing, is there's going to be something from the state or federal government in regards to those that go home due to this particular virus.
Couple more questions. This policy is pretty well written. It appears it's open-ended because this is a fluid situation. You said you would report back, so we have a council meeting in 2 weeks. Would we get an update, obviously, at that time?
Well, my goal is to give daily updates. I've
see.
been doing that for a while.
I see
But first of all, this is a policy that's due for emergency situations. So if we have a flood, if we have an earthquake, if we have a major tornado, this policy would be in effect. It's a policy that we recognized we needed when we started sniffing around and realized that this event was coming up. And so Mr. Burkett was the one who put this together, took a look at what we had done in the past and looked at other policies from other communities, and then came up with this.
So just for the policy, it's just the policy with no renewal aspect or end date? It's just a policy?
No, it's a policy, but the key is the emergency declaration
Right.
that establishes the powers involved.
Okay, I'll ask that question later.
Yeah.
This situation is very fluid and has actually changed dramatically in the last 72 hours. And talking to other mayors, at least in Scott County, I think everyone but one has declared an emergency and putting policies in place like this ahead of that. So those are my questions. Any other questions? Counselor Lehman?
No, sir.
Anybody else? Counselor Brennan?
I don't have a question, but I would like to make a motion to approve the emergency response policy, which gives guidance and authority to the city administrator to take appropriate action in emergency situations.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Brennan, a second by Counselor Contreras. Further discussion? Discussion? By voice vote then, Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Contreras?
Aye.
Counselor Lehman?
Aye.
Counselor Whiting?
Aye.
Mayor Mars? Aye. The policy passes. Thank you very much. Next up is 782, which is a declaration of local emergency due to COVID-19. Mr. Reynolds, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As the mayor just stated a few minutes ago, things have changed rapidly in the last 72 hours. Probably about 72 hours, the idea, the mayor and I had discussed about an emergency declaration, and I was against an emergency declaration. One of the benefits of being in such a great community in the metro area specifically, is that you have some outstanding managers and administrators of other cities. And we've been either getting together or conference calling lately to talk about the issues, and after discussing with them and also recognizing the implications with FEMA if that was to come forward, the reality was that we probably needed to get on the table and do a declaration. So last night, the mayor and I met, and he signed the declaration, which I then emailed to all of you after it was signed. So essentially, the declaration of a local emergency allows cities to utilize special provisions in many state statutes. In particular, the council is able to combat the disaster and provide emergency assistance without complying with time-consuming procedures and formalities that are generally required for a lot of things, including everything from contracting to some employment issues. Once again, it allows us to have the flexibility to do what we need to do if there is a need to. And again, that does not state at any point that, for example, with our particular policy, that the city administrator and staff does not have the absolute responsibility to report everything in a timely manner to council. So with that being said, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Thompson obviously has been up on this particular issue in the last week or so, and he's available to, if you have any legal questions as well.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Counselor Lehman?
Thank you, Mayor. The one question that I had is at the bottom of the resolution, it says passed and adopted by City Council on the 5th of March. That's going to need to be corrected.
Yeah, that 5th of March in 2019, I did this late last night. My apologies. You're right, Counselor. We can make that change.
Mayor, if I can continue?
Yes.
This policy is almost identical to what Prior Lake has passed. As the city administrator pointed out, the intent of what we're trying to accomplish here is to be able to take actions consistent with saving people, helping people. The council does have the authority as a body to rescind this, and it is very fluid. So the toolbox is open. I have tools in my toolbox that many people on council don't know how to use. I know how to use them. Look at this as a toolbox of professional tools being open for the professionals to be able to use them.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Counselor Brennan?
I would like to make a motion to approve resolution number R 2020-044, a resolution to extend the period of the mayoral declaration of a local emergency due to COVID-19.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Counselor Brennan, a second by Counselor Contreras. Questions? I guess going back, we know that the city council can rescind this. How long? We're just gonna, this resolution would stand in place until we rescind it?
Yes, sir, and that's actually a good point that I wanted to touch on a little earlier when we were talking about closing until a time to be determined. The reality is some organizations are saying we're going to do this for 2 weeks. The reality is we have no idea what 2 weeks is going to look like. And it makes more sense to me to close something until a time to be determined where then we can, we're not setting expectations but for people that things might be available and open in a 2-week time frame. So that being said, yes, at some point the city council would rescind this particular motion, which would then restore everything back to the way it should be, if I can say it that way. And then hopefully we move on and do things as we do on a daily basis.
Counselor Lehman?
Mayor, it would be one thing to think about is if the state was to come out of the state declared emergency, that would spark us to come out of ours also. Or the situation locally may be different than statewide. The state could still have an emergency on, and our area might be different situation to where we could stop our emergency prior to the state. That's a decision that would have to be made later.
Okay. Thank you for that. Counselor Whiting, did you have a comment?
Nope.
So then if we met again in 2 weeks, whether here or electronically, we might expect that we would get a report.
Oh, you will get a report, and as it stands now, we're looking to meet electronically from any time forward from now until the future, determined until a time to be determined. So, but yes, we certainly will be keeping both you, the employees, and hopefully the community updated on what's going on.
Is that just for our April 7th, or we're saying we're just going to be electronic
That's correct.
till further notice?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mayor?
Counselor Lehman?
We should probably expect as a council that we will be getting electronic updates between now and the next meeting if there's anything that needs to come to our attention.
Okay. Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, it is my intent to send daily updates to council and employees, even if there's no change. I think it's important that as opposed to people sitting back and wondering, you know, it's like nothing's changed, here's where we are. But so you can expect daily updates from my office.
Okay. Any further questions on the motion that's before us? Seeing none then, by Voice vote, Counselor Lehman,
Aye.
Counselor Brennan,
Aye.
Counselor Contreras,
Aye.
Counselor Whiting,
Aye.
Mayor Mars, aye. Thank you. That resolution passes. We would move ahead then to item 8A is the city bill list for our review. And we would have 8B liaison report. Counselor Brennan.
I have nothing to report. Scale was canceled.
Okay. Counselor Contreras.
For the liaison report for the school, there was not much going on, but there are tons of updates going on with the schools. And the best way to keep up is just going to the website at shakopee.k12.mn.us. That's it.
Excellent. Counselor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. My utility report was also a telephone deal. They offered that to anybody. Councilor Brennan was on the line listening in as the new appointed member. So I would start out with a thank you to Terry Yost and Steve Clay for their many years of service in various capacities to the community. Both well respected and both have done a great job on various bodies. The bids for the tank in West, the new tank in the second higher elevation, there's some questions about the multiple bidders, and so that's under review. There was 2 outages. One was 3,000 people, but it was only 10 seconds. The other one was 3 hours. Apparently a contractor was doing some inline boring, even though it was all marked and everything, and somehow managed to hit an underground line. The utility had 38 to 53 customers with either wind or solar connected to their system. It's the second highest in the state using renewables, next to Rochester, which is the biggest utility in the state. The 83 12th Avenue undergrounding, substantial amount of time discussing that. I'm not going to go into great detail because basically, as you already know, the utility puts together what the numbers are for overhead undergrounding on 3 different lines and forwards that to the city for determination. A lot of talk about the cost and how them costs might be paid. They did take an action with the COVID-19. Some of the actions that they took were they're not going to charge fees on credit card payment. Some people may not pay on credit card because they don't want to pay the $3 fee or whatever, but they're waiving that during this time. They're waiving late fees. They're not going to do disconnects, and they're putting forth a lot of other different payment options to help the social spacing issue. So they're taking pretty aggressive action. It's good to see during this emergency. So I think that's all I have at this time. I did want to take just a moment to thank Mr. Bender for his years of service to the community. I think I got that name right.
Yes.
For his years of service to the community. It's greatly appreciated by all. It's a long time to be that committed, and I hope he has a great and wonderful retirement from the fire department.
I second that, Matt. Thank you very much. Counselor Whiting?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to also thank Mr. Bender for his service to the fire department. I also wanted to mention Minnesota Valley Transit. They're also working on preventative steps in response to the COVID-19, and they're beginning to work under phase 3 of their comprehensive pandemic and continuity operation plans. Part of that is they're going to be doing social distancing with their drivers and keeping that compartment around the driver clear. They're also going to be loading from the rear compartment, rear door, and suspension of fares also. And that suspension of fares goes into effective 3/20, so in a few days. So I think that's just so they're not handling money and things like that. So that's all I have.
Thank you. I don't have a lot been in contact with a lot of my fellow mayors in Scott County over the last 3 days. We're all trying to get our communities in a position here to protect our public safety. Obviously, been in constant contact with the city administrator. I believe that, at least for Shakopeans, we are resilient and adaptable. We will get through this COVID-19 together. We are thinking of those who have come in contact with it or have tested positive. Want every resident to be aware, keep your distance, take time, and slow down. I believe there's a lot of help out there for almost anything. Social media is kind of exploded a little bit with great opportunities of people wanting to help, and I think that actually helps bring a community together. Obviously, this impacts a lot of our local businesses, and so maybe keep that in mind and support our local businesses here if and when you can. And I'm always one that we're all in this together, and we will be stronger for it, so thank you for that. That's all I have to report. Item number 9, is there any other business? Otherwise, if there is no other business, Councilor Brennan?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, April 7th, 2020 at 7 o'clock p.m.
Second.
I have a motion and our second by Councilor Contreras. Further discussion? Discussion? By voice vote. Councilor Brennan.
Aye.
Councilor Contreras.
Aye.
Councilor Lehman.
Aye.
Councilor Whiting. Aye. Mayor Mars. Aye. This meeting stands adjourned then at 7:54.